Every spring, the same pattern repeats across millions of lawns and gardens. A homeowner kneels beside a flower bed, pulling small plants from the soil and dropping them into a bucket destined for the trash. Another walks across the yard with a spray bottle, coating patches of green with herbicide. A third runs a mower over a lawn dotted with white and yellow flowers, cutting them down before they can spread further. The plants being destroyed cost nothing to grow. They appeared without being planted, survived without being watered, and returned year after year without any human intervention. Many of them are more nutritious than the vegetables growing in raised beds a few feet away. Some contain compounds that people spend hundreds of dollars each year trying to obtain through supplements. Others improve the soil simply by existing, depositing nutrients that cultivated crops require but cannot produce themselves. Yet the effort to eliminate them continues, season after season, supported by an entire industry built around the idea that a proper yard contains only grass and deliberately chosen ornamentals. This is a story about 6 plants that most people already have and why the system that taught us to destroy them may have been protecting the wrong thing all along. Before synthetic fertilizers and chemical herbicides reshaped agriculture, these plants occupied a very different position in human food systems. European settlers brought dandelion to North America deliberately in the early 1600s, planting it in gardens as food and medicine. By 1672, botanical surveys noted it was already well established across New England. Indigenous peoples in the eastern woodlands cultivated lamb's quarters as a primary food crop for 4,000 years, predating corn by 15 centuries. Farmers planted clover intentionally to restore exhausted soil, and wood ash was valuable enough to trade across oceans as potash fertilizer. Then the system changed. After World War II, chemical manufacturers redirected wartime production capacity toward civilian markets. Broadleaf herbicides killed dandelion and clover while leaving grass intact, creating the uniform lawns that became symbols of suburban prosperity. Clover, included in lawn seed mixes until 1945, was suddenly reclassified as a weed. The shift was not driven by new understanding of these plants' biology, but by economic logic. An industry needed recurring sales of chemical products. The plants themselves did not change. The system surrounding them did. Dandelion may be the most aggressively targeted. It grows in compacted soil where cultivated plants struggle, survives frost and drought, and produces flowers from early spring through late fall. Every part is edible: leaves, flowers, roots. The taproot extends 18 inches deep, accessing water and minerals that shallow-rooted crops cannot reach. And when it decomposes, it creates channels that improve soil structure. A 2022 study found dandelion greens contain significant levels of beta-carotene, vitamin C, calcium, and potassium. Research documents more vitamin K per serving than most leafy vegetables, along with substantial vitamin A and iron. Spinach must be planted each season, watered regularly, protected from heat stress, and harvested before it bolts. Dandelion returns each year from a root system nearly impossible to eliminate without chemicals. This plant was transported deliberately across an ocean because settlers considered it essential. It was carried intentionally, planted in gardens, and cultivated for 3 centuries, used for salads, cooked greens, wine from flowers, and roasted roots as coffee substitute. The shift in perception happened within the last 70 years, not because anyone discovered dandelion was harmful, but because a new industry needed people to see it as something requiring elimination. Purslane may be the most nutritionally significant. This low-growing succulent appears in garden beds and disturbed soil throughout temperate regions. Most people pull it out without a second thought. What they discard is one of the richest plant sources of omega-3 fatty acids available. A 2014 study documented that purslane contains approximately 4 milligrams of alpha-linolenic acid per gram of fresh weight, the highest source among all green leafy vegetables analyzed. A serving provides omega-3 levels that many people spend $20 to $30 monthly on fish oil supplements to obtain. The plant produces this naturally, without special soil or care, while thriving in conditions that kill most cultivated vegetables. Purslane uses C4 photosynthesis, processing carbon dioxide far more efficiently than most vegetables during heat and drought. While tomatoes wilt in August and lettuce bolts when temperatures rise, purslane reaches peak growth during the hottest, driest summer periods. Research shows it can switch to CAM metabolism under severe water stress, surviving extended drought by opening pores only at night. The same adaptation that allows desert succulents to thrive where almost nothing else grows. Across the Mediterranean and Middle East, purslane remains common food rather than weed. In Lebanon and Palestine, it is bakle, appearing in traditional salads and stews. In Turkey, large bunches go into traditional lamb and bean stew. In Greece, it is sold in markets alongside other vegetables. The knowledge never disappeared in these cultures. It simply failed to transfer into industrial agricultural systems that required mechanization, standardization, and predictable harvest schedules. If purslane fills a nutritional gap most gardens cannot address without supplements, lamb's quarters fills another gap equally difficult to obtain from plant sources. Protein is abundant in legumes and grains, but fresh greens typically provide only modest amounts. Lamb's quarters is an exception. The leaves contain approximately 4.2 grams of protein per 100 grams of raw weight, higher than spinach. The seeds contain roughly 13% protein by weight with an amino acid profile including high levels of lysine and methionine, two compounds often limited in plant-based diets. This is not a recently discovered plant. Lamb's quarters was cultivated as a primary food crop in the eastern woodlands of North America for at least 4,000 years. Archaeological evidence shows indigenous peoples deliberately managed this plant long before corn became the dominant staple. Seeds were harvested in large quantities, stored through winter, and ground into flour or cooked like rice. Leaves were eaten as greens throughout the growing season. This system supported complex societies for millennia, meaning the plant's nutritional value and agricultural reliability were tested across countless generations under diverse environmental conditions. The domesticated variety eventually disappeared after European contact disrupted indigenous agricultural systems, but the wild form never left. It still grows in disturbed soil, along garden edges, in vacant lots, and anywhere ground has been recently turned. A single mature plant can produce tens of thousands of tiny black seeds in a season, and those seeds remain viable in soil for years. Once lamb's quarters establishes itself, it returns reliably without human intervention. The leaves are tender and mild, similar to spinach but often more palatable because they lack the slight bitterness spinach develops as it matures. They can be eaten raw in small quantities or cooked like any leafy green. The seeds require soaking overnight and rinsing to remove saponins, after which they cook like quinoa, not coincidentally. Since quinoa and lamb's quarters belong to the same plant family and share similar nutritional profiles, the plants discussed so far prefer full sun or partial sunlight. Wood sorrel occupies a different niche. This small plant with heart-shaped leaves and delicate flowers grows in partial shade, under trees, along north-facing walls, and in areas where most cultivated vegetables struggle. It thrives in marginal spaces gardeners often consider dead zones, while providing one of the nutrients that becomes scarce in diets based on stored grains and root vegetables. Wood sorrel gets its distinctive sour citrusy flavor from oxalic acid, the same compound that makes rhubarb tart. That flavor indicates the plant's vitamin C content, high enough that wood sorrel was historically valued as a scurvy remedy when fresh plant material was unavailable. The plant produces new growth very early in spring, often appearing in late February or March, and continues producing through fall. Children often eat it instinctively when they encounter it, drawn by the sour taste. The entire plant is edible, leaves, flowers, seed pods, and roots, though leaves are usually harvested. They can be added raw to salads in small quantities, providing acidity similar to lemon juice, or cooked briefly to reduce oxalic acid content. The plant self-seeds readily and spreads through underground rhizomes in some species. Once it establishes itself in a shaded area, it returns year after year without maintenance, filling a functional gap few cultivated crops can address. Clover occupies yet another category. Unlike the other plants discussed, clover does not primarily offer nutritional value for humans, though both leaves and flowers are edible and flowers have been used in herbal medicine for centuries. What clover offers instead is something most gardens need, but few gardeners cultivate deliberately: nitrogen. Clover belongs to the legume family and hosts bacteria in root nodules that capture atmospheric nitrogen and convert it into forms plants can use. This process, called nitrogen fixation, deposits nutrients directly into soil without external inputs. A dense stand of clover growing in a lawn or garden bed actively improves ground fertility every single day. Before synthetic nitrogen fertilizers became widely available in the mid-20th century, farmers planted clover specifically for this purpose. It was not considered a weed. It was a tool for restoring exhausted fields. Crop rotation systems across Europe and North America included clover as a standard component, grown between grain crops to rebuild soil nitrogen levels depleted during previous harvests. Clover seed was routinely included in lawn seed mixes sold to homeowners, because lawns containing clover required less fertilizer and stayed green longer during dry periods. That changed after 1945 when broadleaf herbicides became commercially available. These chemicals killed clover effectively while leaving grass unharmed, ideal for creating uniform lawns. Once herbicides made it easy to eliminate clover, marketing around lawn care shifted to redefine it as a weed rather than a beneficial plant. Seed companies stopped including it in their mixes, and an entire generation learned to see white clover flowers in lawns as signs of neglect rather than healthy, self-fertilizing ground cover. Red clover flowers contain compounds called isoflavones, studied for potential effects on cardiovascular health and hormonal balance. Dried red clover flowers sell in herbal stores for $8 to $15 per ounce, meaning a plant growing freely in a lawn produces a product people pay significant amounts to obtain in processed form. Chickweed operates on a different timeline than any of the other plants discussed. It grows during late winter and early spring, often appearing in February or March, weeks before the last frost date, and long before any cultivated vegetable can be safely planted outdoors. This timing is its primary survival advantage. In any food system that depends on stored crops, the most dangerous period is the gap between depleted winter stores and the first spring harvest. Chickweed fills that gap, producing dense mats of tender, edible growth during weeks when almost nothing else is available, and it does so without requiring any planting or care. The plant is mild in flavor, similar to baby spinach, and can be eaten raw or cooked. It contains vitamin C, calcium, magnesium, and iron, and has been used historically as a poultice for skin irritation and minor wounds, a practice supported by research documenting its anti-inflammatory properties. One plant can produce roughly 800 seeds, and studies show that a small percentage remain viable in soil for 10 years or longer. Once chickweed establishes itself in a garden, it returns every late winter for as long as the garden exists. By the time summer crops need the space, chickweed has already finished its growing cycle and died back, leaving the ground available without competition. Taken together, these 6 plants represent something most food systems cannot easily replicate: a combination of nutrition, resilience, and permanence that requires no external inputs and no annual replanting. They deliver omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin C, protein, calcium, iron, and nitrogen fertility. They provide fresh greens in early spring, summer abundance during heat and drought, and growth in shaded areas where cultivated crops fail. They return year after year from root systems and seed banks that persist despite repeated attempts at elimination. The average American household spends more than $500 each year on lawn care, and a significant portion of that money goes toward destroying exactly these plants. The system being protected through that effort, the one that depends on grocery supply chains, annual seed purchases, chemical fertilizers, and irrigation infrastructure, is the system that can fail when conditions change. The plants being eliminated are the ones that have already survived ice ages, droughts, floods, and every major shift in climate and human land use over thousands of years. The question is not whether these plants can provide food. They already do in the regions and cultures that never stopped using them. The question is whether the knowledge of how to recognize and use them will remain accessible, or whether it will continue to fade as more people are taught to see them only as problems requiring chemical solutions. What grows at the margins, ignored or actively destroyed, may turn out to be more valuable than what occupies the center. The weeds are not the fragile part of this system. They never were.